Okay, so hi everyone. It's nice to see you all. I'm Bonnie, and you've just heard about me and Luke, and we're going to talk to you today about our education initiative, Praxical. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people, who are the First Nations people of Australia and the traditional custodians of the land. I'm currently speaking to you today from Darawal country, and Luke will be speaking to you today from Bedegal country. And these workshops were developed on numerous countries throughout Australia. And we just really like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people as not only the First Nations people, but the first scientists in Australia. So Praxical, a bit about us. As you heard, we are PhD candidates at the Australian Centre for Astrobiology. And we are also very passionate and enthusiastic about science outreach and engagement. Luke has previously worked for Engineers Without Borders and spent a lot of time in high schools and other schools doing engagement on the ground with a lot of people. And I've worked a lot doing one-on-one mentoring and engagement and tutoring with people. For me, I really want to engage with people and make science more accessible for everyone, because I feel like a lot of the time science is in a language or a jargon that's not really accessible to people that don't have a scientific education. So Luke and I have been working together on outreach and engagement for about 15 or 16 months now. And this was really born out of an experience that we had last year. Our supervisor, Martin van Kronendonk, was leading a tour for NASA scientists and European Space Agency scientists. And they were coming out to our field site in the Pilbara to get a sense of what it might be to look for life on Mars. Of course, the rocks in the Pilbara are about 3.5 billion years old. And that's about the same time that Mars would have been warm and wet. And so these scientists came out to learn from Martin about what he knew about these rocks and the challenges of looking for life in deep time. Martin had won a research grant at about the same time and offered for Luke and I to be able to organize a kind of outreach event or activity. And we very eagerly took that up. And so Luke organized for us to speak to the local high school, which is Headland High. And we spoke with them about what was happening with the NASA and ESA scientists and how we'd love to take a group of their students out and do an astrobiology field camp. So we organized this field camp, and it was months of work and an incredibly hard slog by the teachers who made it possible. And we brought 16 high school students out into our field site, and they got to hang out with the scientists from the Mars rovers and learn a bit about the behind the scenes action and what scientists do. And then we took them out and we did a whole series of astrobiology related field activities. What you can see in this photo is 46 meters of material, which represent the history of the Earth. And these students had soft toys of different kinds of animals, and they were guessing when in Earth's history these animals had evolved. And of course, it's a trick because we all evolved much later than anybody thinks. And so this was how we sort of started getting the students to think about deep time. After this activity, we took the students out to the Strelley Pool Chart, the site of some of the oldest fossils on Earth. And we did a scavenger hunt with them where they looked for stromatolite fossils. And we worked with them and learnt from them actually about how they saw the rocks and what they saw in the rocks and what they viewed the fossils as, coming from students that hadn't heard of stromatolites before we took them out into the field area. Later that night, we had a nighttime astronomy event, a cultural astronomy event. And the next day, the students made their own rovers and got to experience what it would be like and what the kind of challenges are that you would think about. And they also did some activities with making fossils out of clay. And during this event, Luke and I were sort of reflecting a lot about how much we were actually learning from the students, how much we got out of it, and how much the students got out of actually doing hands-on in science. Quite a few of the students told us that they thought geology and rocks were really, really boring, that they didn't know that there was something so exciting in their backyard, and they thought that it was just filled with a bunch of hot rocks, and that they had a new sort of appreciation that they just didn't get in the classroom from having this sorts of hands-on science. So I'm going to show you a quick little 2-minute video about this field trip. Anna, could you change over the video streaming so that we can show the video, if that's okay?
It's actually in the controls when you share it.
Oh, okay. Let's have it.
Yeah.
I'll just stop sharing for a second and have a look what I've got to do. Oh, there we go. Okay, beautiful. Okay. So this is just a little clip that UNSW put together from our field trip.
We've developed a relationship with NASA over many years. We've led field trips to come to the Pilbara and use these outcrops essentially as a training ground for understanding how and where to search for life on Mars. One of the great parts of our job is that we get to engage students in the wonder that we have in our work. I mean, we're very lucky that we get to do something we're passionate about and that we love. Our outreach event is actually being run by 2 of my PhD students, and they're bringing year 7 to 10 Indigenous high school students from Port Hedland down onto country to share their experience of what it's like to do science in the outback, and to instill a sense of wonder in the kids about, you know, the ability to read the rocks, to learn more about country, to understand the secrets that are locked away in their own backyard, and hopefully inspire them into a lifelong love of learning.
We're pretty passionate about outreach and working with communities and kids and really getting our science out there. It was cool, like, seeing how the kids viewed the fossils that we see, you know, pictures of every day, and we're out here every year looking at them, and they see them so differently.
There's 46 meters of material, which represents the history of the Earth.
I was talking with some of the students about how these rocks have seen everything. Like, there was no river here, there was no sand here, and they really just watched the whole world develop and change around them. And so these rocks have really experienced almost the entirety of Earth's history. And so they were talking with me about how that's really changed their perspective. I actually dropped out of high school, and I didn't get into university the first time I tried to go. And when I started going to uni, I found it very inaccessible. I felt like an outsider, and I didn't have access to the vocabulary that everybody else had. And I can see that often these sorts of programs, they're aimed at inner city kids who already have so many opportunities and advantages. And I really wanted to give students the same opportunities that I've always wanted and dreamed of. So this has been a very labor of love. This has been a labor of love, definitely. I hope that this can be a program that we repeat. I don't want to be someone who just rocks up, looks at the fossils and goes back to Sydney. I want to be involved, and I want to talk to the students. I want to hear what they have to say about the fossils and how their local knowledge can enrich what we know.
Driving community awareness about the special nature of these outcrops is really critical to us and critical to the survival of these outcrops into the future. So part of our outreach plan is not just to inspire, but also to generate knowledge and interest in this very special aspect that's only in Australia and should be preserved for all of humanity.
So after the field trip, we were all ready to go back out to the high school and start doing this kind of outreach again. And of course, COVID threw a spanner in the works. And so we started working with UNSW about ways that we could do this digitally. And Luke was really the person that came up with this idea of taking content that was already there, but not developed for the online space, and rewriting it and making it so this was something that people could just sit down and do, that teachers didn't have to rewrite, that was meant for people who weren't necessarily scientists or subject matter experts, and also something that an individual could do, because a lot of the types of scientific engagement that you get to do where you're working hands-on with data is usually something that you do with a teacher in the classroom, either at school or at university or at some kind of community college. So through connections with the ANSTO, which is a nuclear science organisation here in Australia, and our New South Wales Government Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, along with the ACA, we developed workshops covering a range of different sciences so that we could try to appeal to people with broad interests and make these workshops tangible and exciting for everyone. So Luke's going to take over and talk now a bit about the actual workshops themselves and what we did with them.
So yeah, as Bonnie mentioned, fantastically, that there are a few gaps in the market for online engagement. There's so much stuff out there. Every, big STEM organization, universities, research centers, they all create material, but it's getting that material out to the masses, out to students, and getting them to engage with that, which seems to be where a lot of their outreach endeavors break down. Bonnie and I, and together with Shane Hanks, who is an education officer here at the University of New South Wales, and other school teachers and people we collaborated with, we came up with a slightly different and new way to do online outreach. And we really focused on 4 main principles. And the first one, as we mentioned, is all about collaboration and building on what already exists. There's no point reinventing the wheel and trying to create online resources again that people already have. We found that in this area, everyone's really just keen to share. No one's selfish or guarding their outreach material. They just want people to use it. So it was quite easy for us to approach some really big STEM organizations in Australia and say, we see you've already got some material that's been either developed for broader, like a few weeks worth of material for a classroom, or it's made purely for in-hand material. So they have PDFs that you can download and work on. We want to try and make that more compact and put that online. So they gave us their material, we could work with them and really help them adapt to a new online medium. The second thing that we found was really important in our workshops is trying to make them sustainable. And what we mean by that is that a lot of outreach materials, they always need continued input by a facilitator. So they'll make a workshop, but it's up to a teacher to hand it out, to mark those answers, to ask questions and to give answers. And that can be limiting, for individuals who want to do the workshop that don't have a teacher present to give them some help. But also it always means you need to have someone, either a great group of volunteers or someone paid to keep going through and doing those workshops, which can be very time consuming and hard to scale up to larger scales. So we really wanted to make from the beginning a series of workshops that were, sustainable, where they're totally self-sufficient. So we can give them to someone, they can go through the entire process without having to worry about a teacher or facilitator coming in and marking that or being involved in any way. So they can, we can share it to as many people as we like, and they can still get the same experience. On top of that, we found that breaking the workshops up into modules is a really good way. A lot of people, especially if they're new to science, that haven't done science in a while, or they're students that are the first time experiencing some of the concepts, sitting down and doing an hour and a half of straight science is incredibly daunting. So breaking them up into little sort of bite-sized pieces where they can stop every 10, 15 minutes along the way. They can go and Google something or talk to someone about it. They can have a break and come back later that day or whenever they want, we found was really effective. And a big thing as well is always assessing your impact and learning from that and building in that assessment process as part of your outreach program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So we created a few different workshops. One of them was called Exploring Habitable Worlds, which I think would be most interesting to everyone here. And we based it around the NASA JPL simulator. So as you can see here, this is a screenshot from one of our workshops. So you have a whole bunch of learning activities. You can sort of work through these modules. There's text, there's questions, there's videos. Oh, sorry, so here are the courses. So we have made 3 different kinds of courses, as Bonnie mentioned. We had one on conserving endangered species, where students or individuals can use a GIS mapping tool. So that's an online interactive mapping tool to figure out where the best habitat was for an endangered bird that we have here in Australia. We have one on monitoring air pollution. So that was working with the Australian Nuclear Research Organisation, which is ANSTO. and they are collecting fine air particle pollution for the last 30 years all around Australia and around the world. So we give students access to some of that data and see if they can use that to predict how seasons come into effect with air pollution, but also what are some of the global trends, how has it changed over time, and how does it affect things like climate change. And then finally, the Exploring Habitable Worlds one, which was focused on astrobiology. So one thing we did was that we took all the instructions that people have made in the past for online workshops, and we filmed demonstrations of doing them online. We found that unless you had a teacher there to show someone how they worked, it could be quite confronting, and that can be a really steep learning barrier. So we actually did screen recordings of ourselves doing the workshops with narration behind it, talking people through it, explaining some of the problems they might get with glitches in the computer or ways the internet was working and the ways to overcome that. So that really helped lower that barrier for people who may be a bit scared of embarking on a online workshop with a whole bunch of different texts there. So the workshop was based around this thing called the JPL NASA Extreme Planet Makeover. So this is an example of a big organization like NASA. They're making outreach material all the time, but sometimes it's not equipped for the audience that you're trying to target, because we're trying to target, younger students, year 9 and 10, or even earlier. And for individuals that have left science and they're coming back, this standalone simulator is fun and really exciting. And I recommend everyone to go and have a go at it. But if you don't know much about planets or astrobiology, it's hard to interact with it. So as you can see along the bottom, you have different sort of toggles that you can use to create your own custom planet. So you can change the distance of that planet from the star, the planet's size, the type of sun that it orbits around, its age, and then explore a few other known exoplanets, as well as planets in our solar system. And they can really use that to see how different astronomical characteristics can affect the habitability of a planet. If you change your star type and you move that star too far away from your planet, you can click on that planet. It'll tell you now that it's become an ice ball. It's too cold on there for liquid water to exist on the surface. And we go into a bit of explanation why that wouldn't be as beneficial for habitable life as we know it on that surface. We touch on, icy worlds and oceans under crust and all that kind of stuff, but it's really just introducing people to the idea of habitability and how planets may be different. For a lot of people in the general public, they don't even know that there are planets outside our solar system. They only think there's 8 or 9 planets, whatever it is, around the sun, and that's it. So even that as a simple, concept to expand the idea of what a planet is and how there could be, countless numbers of planets elsewhere in the galaxy and the universe is very, it's a new concept, and we really wanted to drill that in and lead people through it. The main thing that we did in these workshops was all around something called problem-based learning or project-based learning. So instead of telling people that, if a planet's further away from a star, it will be, colder and maybe icy on that surface, we let them work that out from themselves. So they can move their planet further away from the star and see how it gets all, covered in ice. They can click on it and get more information about it and learn it. What we did as well, which was really exciting, was that we gave them little information cards with actual data from exoplanets that we found in the literature, and they can plug that into this simulator to see if this simulator matches up with what the literature's found. So they can say that yes, there's an exoplanet being found around this certain star type, this distance from the star, and around this size, and it'll tell them, is it a giant Earth, is it a hot Jupiter, what kind of planet is it? And then we can give them little snippets of even just the heading of an academic paper where a whole bunch of scientists have said, yes, we found a new giant Earth. And I think that's really exciting, because when someone from the general public or a student looks at an academic paper, it can be very daunting. There's all these references there they don't know about. There's all this jargon and figures, but just saying, wow, I can, using this planet simulator, get up an idea, a perception of what this planet might be like. And look, that's been confirmed, that's backed up by this academic paper. And I can recognize that word in the heading. It says an ice ball planet, which is what I found as well. That's a very good way of getting people to break down those barriers of science, as Bonnie suggested earlier. So we've created a really great workshop we just started releasing them on Friday. We've already had 350 students enroll in them and some really great feedback so far. It's still very early days. It's still very experimental, but we're really happy with the potential outreach that we have from this. We have over 200 teachers that have signed up saying that they're interested in doing these workshops. And each one of those have 20 or 30 students in their classroom. You know, that could be up to 6,000 students doing our workshop, which is very, very exciting. Some reasons why we think these workshops may be successful is that we have worked with teachers. So, you know, Bonnie and I may be sort of subject matter experts within astrobiology to some extent, but we have no idea of really what it's like to work with students. You know, we've done our own experiences. We had a bit of fun doing that, but we haven't studied it. We're not doing it day in, day out. So working with high school teachers, working with collaborating with teachers who work full-time with students, they gave us an insight that we were never really aware of. So that was incredibly helpful. On that note, we constantly found you need to test whatever product you're making with a right audience. You know, the biggest thing I was told when I was getting into kind of the whole startup product development field was that you can't assume you're normal. If you think something's very easy or you think something's very attractive of a product, it's probably because you've got your own bias there and you probably don't reflect the wider community that you're trying to outreach to. So we got our grandparents, our friends and family who had never finished even science in high school, you know, to go down and do these workshops and let us know how they went. And we had a lot of great, you know, results from that, a lot of great feedback from that, that we had never even imagined that could be a problem or ever imagined something that they really loved that we just thought was a little tack on that we didn't really care about. So that was a really good way of creating a well-rounded product. The other thing that we did, which was suggested to us by these high school teachers that we collaborated with, was something called scaffolded teaching. So when you give someone a problem, there's different ways that people like to solve that problem. Sometimes they just want to get the problem straight up there and go with it and try and figure it out for themselves. Others like to read through all the instructions. They want to really know how it works and be taught how it's worked before they do it themselves. Scaffolding is a way of addressing both of those learning styles. So we give someone a problem like, here's this planet simulator. What happens if a planet is too far away from its star? They can either just go out there and play around and figure it out for itself, or we give a few, you know, hints in text to see if they're struggling a bit. Then if they're still not working for them, the next level would be detailed text so they can read through and sort of work through to try and figure out how that simulator works. And then finally, we have these, you know, full detailed descriptive videos showing them exactly what they have to do. So they can choose how detailed they want their instructions, which makes the learning experience a lot more enriched for them, but also feels like they're not being belittled or babied. You know, we're not holding the hand along the way. We're giving them problems and then giving them just the right amount of information they need to solve that problem, which builds a real sense of independence in the learners, which is really important. And finally, I think something that we were very happy with was that we used the resources that were already available to us. So most universities have already amazing website developers, they have education officers, they have lots of support there to help build these kind of things up. But as academics, we very rarely, or as students or teachers, whatever, very rarely have the ability to work with them, mainly because we don't ask, we don't know that they exist. So we're very lucky to tap into a big, broad range of educators and tech developers at UNSW, and a few companies that are associated with that. And they really helped us choose the right platform to build our websites on, and really showed us the way to making these kind of workshops. So I really recommend, if you're doing anything like this, definitely reach out to people in your area. As I said before, everyone's just keen to get science out there and they're always open to, you know, collaborate and work and help out. So quickly, I'll just touch a few notes on marketing and promotion, because, you know, it doesn't matter how good your product is unless you can get it out there to the people who will value from it. I guess one thing that we noted that a lot of people would already understand, that sharing with groups or contacts that are familiar with your content, it's very effective. You know, the people who are already really passionate about space or NASA or planets or the origin of life, it's very easy to get them involved. But that can create this problem of preaching to the choir. So a lot of the times these science outreach workshops, they can be only giving it to people who are already involved in science, passionate about science and engaged in science. It's actually very difficult to capture those people who are on the fringes who may have some common interest, but it's hard to get them and bring them in. One way we found that was very effective at doing this was looking at adjacent interests or adjacent groups of people, mainly through Facebook. So as I said, we had one that was all around conservation biology and looking at these endangered species of birds, rather than just going for, targeting biologists or ecologists or people studying that. We're looking at bushwalking groups or hiking groups or bird watching groups or people that are interested in online technology for mapping. We're trying to get the adjacent people who already have some inkling that they may be interested in it, but aren't targeted directly at, conservation biology, mainly just so we can get a broader range of people getting involved. And that's been really effective for us. So I would definitely recommend that. Another thing for social media we found that was very helpful was piggybacking on other media opportunities. As a lot of you would know, Perseverance Rover launched, a few weeks ago, and especially Bonnie has been absolutely swamped with media opportunities to talk about her research. Her research is, and especially her master's, was directly related to some of the technology you can use to look for rocks on Mars, and she's still doing that now in a PhD, especially in the Pilbara. So she was on our national radio station. There were lots of interviews and media going out there about her work. And she was fantastic because every time they were talking about it, she would also say, and we've got this great learning opportunity called Praxical if you want to know more. And she would always plug it. She would always put it in there, and with a lot of hype through that as well. So I would definitely recommend, don't be shy and use any opportunity you have to promote your outreach, because you may be able to catch a few more people that have never been involved in science, but want to, get involved. I just want to know how to get involved. A final thing that I really want to touch on, and that Bonnie's really been leading, is the importance of evaluation. So there's no point doing outreach if you don't know if you're successful, because how do you know? If you don't know if it's working, you don't even know if you succeeded, if you're doing it right, and maybe totally useless. What we found was that from a very early stage in the project, we wanted to build in and integrate outreach capabilities. So because we're doing it online, we have the ability to collect a lot of analytics. We can see how long students spend on a web page. We can figure out how long of that instructional demonstration video they're watching before they click off it and do the work, to see how much they need of that. And that's been really important for us in understanding what our community needs and how we can best suit them to really understand the science. Beyond that, when you start evaluating on that level, you have potential for academic publication and recognition. So Bonnie's gone through the process of getting an ethics approval to get surveys from participants over 18 that are involved in our workshops, to really understand how their view on the nature of science, how they view science as a process has changed through doing some of these workshops. Because our workshops, they are explorative, they're about doing the science yourself, we think they're going to be very effective at getting people to think about what science is on a deeper level beyond all this surface level content. So Bonnie and a few of our friends that are in that space of evaluating research and how do you, statistically prove that, have made some very clever survey questions and analytical techniques to work out what's going on for that. And hopefully that will result in a publication. So it's a way of getting our success out there so other people doing outreach can really figure out what works and what doesn't and how to make the most effective outreach. And finally, when you start getting evaluation, you can start getting feedback from your students, which is not only helpful for developing a better course, but it can also be sometimes really heartwarming and, give you that motivation to keep going. So as some of our motivation we've had from the feedback, one student, they loved the interaction. They said it was more than our own school teachers do with our class, which is saying something. Then they said in brackets, which I think was very nice, keep going, good job. If I had money of my own, then I probably would have donated it to you, which I thought was very endearing. You can imagine a young teenager, someone writing that, which really for me, not only showed that our workshops were interesting, but they valued it enough to leave a response in the first place, but to leave such a nice long worded response. So that was very exciting. So the next steps for us, as we said, this was just the beginning. This was an experiment to see how well it worked. we've just been awarded a U21, so that's the University 21, a consortium of universities. They've given us a small grant to build a series of astrobiology workshops with the University of Auckland and McMaster University. So for those of you who don't know, at the University of Auckland, they've got an amazing research team there in astrobiology, mainly focusing on hot springs, both ancient hot springs and modern hot springs, and their involvement in the origin of life, and preserving ancient life. And then McMaster University, they have the planet simulator. So they've built this custom-made instrument for testing prebiotic experiments in different atmospheres, of different pressures, different types of radiation and lighting coming down in there. So these are big institutions like the ACA in doing real astrobiology research, and we're working with the PhD students from these universities to make a online workshop for both high school students and for the general public to know a bit more about astrobiology. What we've shown time and time again, but especially in these workshops, that astrobiology and space and the origin of life is so exciting. Out of the 350 workshops that people have signed up for, 280 of them have been for the origin of life workshops. That really is a bit of anecdotal evidence showing that students and individuals, the general public, just really love astrobiology. So I think that's a real benefit of our research, that we are working in an area that is so captivating to the general public, but also a bit of a responsibility. You know, if we're making discoveries that are so interesting to the public, we really should be working hard to get that out there, to get people involved and excited in our research. So beyond that, we're also looking to collaborate further to not only promote these courses. So after this seminar, Anna can send through an email with some links to the courses if you want to send through to any high schools or individuals or students or networks that you have that may enjoy doing them. But also, yeah, as we make more workshops in the area of astrobiology, would love to work with you, even if you have any ideas for cool workshops or data sets that people could look at, or you want to get in front of a camera and talk about your research, or you want us to help build some interactive tools and some really great websites, anything like that, would love to chat more. So hopefully we finished up a bit earlier from the talking side as anticipated, so we can have a really nice chat now about what we've done and what we can hopefully do together in the future. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening in. That was really nice.